Hello and welcome to this virtual training session. The topic for today's presentation is Afaria SP4 and Roadmap. It will be presented by Mark Jordan and Don Cope. Before we get started, I need to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. In the Recorded Connect session, your name may be visible to other people who are viewing the recording. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. At the end of the presentation, we will open the lines for questions. Now, I would like to introduce Mark to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Rahul. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for joining. As stated, what we're going to be covering today really is Afaria, what we have just released in late November. We wanted to do a refresher on SP4 to make sure that everybody knew really what was in that release, because it was a very, very big release, and then use that as a foundation for what we're going to be doing in the future. So we'll talk about our roadmap over the next 18 months and primarily what our release schedule might look like. So just to give you all a pretty good idea of what we're planning and so that you can make plans of your own. So first things first, let's get the legal stuff out of the way. This is a roadmap and does contain future-facing information. It is subject to change. The intent is to give you guys as much foresight into what we're doing, but then again, as you know, things change. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So I'll do a very, very quick level set here with everybody. Enterprise mobility has changed, from the traditional device management. I'm sure all very well aware of this. So from SAP standpoint, as a solution provider, we're actually having to come at this in a few different ways with a few different solutions that all kind of merge into mobility. So it's more than just device management today. That's really just the foundation. And then, of course, each of the platforms really handle this, the management very differently. For instance, iOS has a standard way of doing things. Android is highly fragmented. Windows Phone's just coming into things, doing things in a little bit of a kind of the iOS, but in a little bit of a hybrid fashion. So, but it's very, very different and unique. And so the different needs that enterprises have today vary. And so you have to have various technologies and strategies to be able to address this. So SAP is has built a broad solution that is more enterprise mobility management that has several different aspects. So we have the traditional device management. You have also what's found in the MAM, or mobile application management space, so that needs to be a definite part. It's always been something that you've kind of done in device management where you would deliver and remove applications, but it goes a lot deeper than that. Security models are very different. The types of things that you want to do with applications has really expanded. So you have things like application wrapping and stuff like that. So that's all kind of evolved a little bit. So we've had to have an offering there. Content management, same thing. You want to manage content in a different way. You want to deliver documents down to the devices. That requires a whole strategy. And that functionality ranges from the very simple to the very, very complex, especially when you get into things like collaboration and document sharing. That gets pretty big, pretty fast, and so you need to have a solid offering in that area. And then, of course, communication, the ability to give you telecom activity management so that you can see the activities, helps with cost cutting and stuff like that. So these, as well as many others, are starting to really converge into what has been the traditional MDM space. And so we're just building the strategy for that within SAP so that we can provide a full solution to our customers. Okay, so enough of that. So let's talk about SP4. So this was a huge release. Again, it was in November. Hopefully many of you have heard about this, so I'm not going to go through the entire SP4 presentation, but enough of it to really let you know the highlights. And then, of course, if you've got any questions at the end, please feel free to ask them, and we'll be happy to answer them. I'm sorry, I've also failed to introduce my colleague, Don Coop, who will be chiming in and helping on part of this presentation as well. Okay, so SP4 was really big. So iOS 7 came out last year. Windows Phone 8 had some new capabilities. as well as Samsung Knox was a really big feature release last year. And so that's where we focused the bulk of SP4 on, was handling these big areas. And I'll talk a little bit more in depth on each one. We also did some internal house cleaning where we streamlined some performance. We've increased some security and taken some different approaches to things, and then I'll cover each one of those in depth as well. So the first one is iOS. In the general iOS platform, we made a few changes here. As you know, the Apple configurator is a way to put an Apple device in what they call supervised mode. This is used primarily for education or retail, where you want to have a single application running on the device, maybe talking to a single network. It gives you that kind of control, what we would call more draconian type of control over a device. And it has to be flipped into a certain mode into supervised mode. Well, this is something that we've added into SP4 so that now we can support that model of managing those devices. We've made several changes on the client side. We added a client-side schedule. As you know, iOS right now has what we call server-side outbound schedules that the server decides when to reach out to these clients. Well, we also built in a client-side heartbeat so that the client itself will always check in on its own too. So you've got the initial and we've also changed, of course, the look and feel. iOS 7 had a very different look, and the way that they wanted apps to behave and work on iOS 7 was a little different in some areas. So, of course, we added that in there as well. One of the things they did deprecate on the telecom expense management side, so the activity, iOS 7 no longer allows us to get the voice information. So we can really only collect information on the data. That's just kind of a limitation of the platform. So we had to adjust for that. We also added NitroDesk touchdown application support. So NitroDesk has an iOS email client, which is a standalone third-party email client for ActiveSync. They have a version for Android, but they've also introduced one for iOS. They had to make a lot of changes for iOS 7. We've adapted those, and so we kind of released at the same time that the other one came out so that we could stay lockstep with some of the changes that came around. Let me see. A couple of these other things, they're probably a little less high on your list, so I'll kind of move on a little bit. The big news really is iOS 7. So there's a lot of changes around that new platform. You never know year to year if Apple's going to put a lot of new features in. Well, last year they certainly did. And they tried to plug a couple of gaps, and I think they were effective to a certain point for certain things, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But they really put a lot of focus on application management. So when we talk about MAM, there's a lot of strategies for protecting your applications. There's wrapping, there's hardening, there's containerization and things like that. There's all kinds of different approaches to really make applications secure. Well, one of the things that iOS did is that they added some new capabilities for managing the applications, securing them, and giving you a little bit more control. And so one of the big areas is really around configuration. So you can have an application and get it onboarded. In other words, your app might need to know, especially the enterprise app, might need to talk to a specific IP address or maybe a specific port. Or maybe within that application, depending on the user or some other factor, you might want to have the behavior of that application be different. What Apple has done is given you a standard way within the platform to be able to code for that within your app. And that you can utilize device management like Afaria to pass those parameters into that application. So this makes it easy for your end user so they're not trying to launch an application and type in IP addresses and things like that. It puts all of the hands into the programmer and into the IT administrator, so that's very helpful. They also do things like application feedback where the data can come back from the application be stored in the Afaria database, and then you can retrieve that for utilizing for troubleshooting, looking for errors, and for some application behavior as well. Another big area was around open-in management. So what this really means is that if an application is considered to be under control or under MDM control, that you can control whether or not that managed application will open up in, say, a third-party app. For instance, maybe I might have an email attachment, and will it open up into a Dropbox or not? And you really want to protect that. So they've added that protection so that not only applications, but even native email on the device can be set under this parameter, so that this way email attachments or any documents that might be opened up in a document management type of software or an application would not open into an unmanaged and unsecured repository on the device. So this kind of gives you what we call DLP. So it can kind of give you some data leak protection on that device. Another thing that they added around the application side is what we a per app VPN. So what this does is gives you the capability to have a VPN on the device and have each application call up that VPN based on the configuration. So this allows you to have a secure tunnel for that application. It happens all automatically, and it's all very secure. Now, this is a capability they've built into iOS 7. VPN providers are still trying to catch up here. I believe a couple of them have already announced it. I think, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Cisco has done something here. And, no?
Yeah, so actually most of them have not. F5, I believe, is one of the few that's actually updated their app to support it, but most of the others are in the same position of Apple announced it. It was news to the VPN providers, and now they are trying to get it into their release. But I expect that to be coming for most of them this quarter because it's as you can imagine, it's a powerful feature for most enterprises to be able to bind an app to a VPN and to automate that so the end user isn't opening and doing anything. They just open the app and run it, and it's in a VPN tunnel.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we think that's a very good feature. As Don pointed out, I think that's going to add a lot to the security. Another thing they did is on the volume purchase program, they made some pretty big changes. When they first introduced this, they were using redemption codes really to license the software out from the volume purchase program, and you couldn't redeem them. In other words, if you had bought a bulk of applications and you got 100 licenses and you deployed those 100 licenses and then 5 people quit, you could not redeem those 5 licenses back into your license pool to reissue to the 5 new people. They've changed that. They've added some hooks for MDM to be able to help you manage those codes, and also to reuse them if you need to. So there's been fairly well revamped, and it's a lot better. On the MDM side, there's quite a few new MDM options for control. A lot of new queries, some new restrictions. I've got a slide where I'll show you some of the restrictions. Another area for applications is around single sign-on. So if you're utilizing authentication for your apps on the device, what happens is that if you want to have one authenticate and you want to go to the other app, you got to authenticate into that one, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a federation of apps, if you will. So they've built the ability to put in single sign-on. So once I've signed in on an application, I can get a token, a Kerberos token at this point, so that if I've signed into one, I will have signed into the others that participate in this single sign-on configuration. Right now, it's just with Kerberos, but we think they're going to add to this as time goes on. Okay, third-party app protection. This is just really something that they've kind of built into all of the apps that are on the App Store. so that they're protected under the user's passcode. That's just kind of a standard thing with Apple. Okay, so that's kind of iOS 7 at a high level. One of the other things that we've added is the ability to simplify the enrollment process. So this is something that we are continuously trying to do. iOS 7 did introduce a couple of capabilities that allow us to have what we would call a one-click enrollment. And what I mean by that is this is one click from the MDM side. Apple still has a few enrollment prompts that come with the OS. Those will always be there. But from our side, we wanted to make it as easy as possible. So we've done it here in iOS, and as we get into the roadmap, you'll see we're doing it with other platforms. But essentially what this is that you can go to the Afaria self-service portal. You click your enroll button, so to speak. It will enroll that device into MDM, and then any applications or policies are now delivered underneath that MDM umbrella. So it gives you a nice, easy way to onboard your users so they're not trying to figure things out. There's no context changing going back and forth. We think it really is going to help a lot with user adoption, getting people onboarded very easily. Okay, so here's a bit of an eye chart. I just wanted to pop it up so you get a good idea of what type of new filters and restrictions I'll put into the device. As you can see on one side, we have kind of the standard device mode, which is what we would do in just regular MDM. And then the other side is supervised mode. So when we put it into that supervised mode click over, which we talked about earlier, you have a much more granular type of lockdown that you wouldn't have normally. Okay, so Windows Phone 8, I've got one slide on here. So just at a high level, and then I'll turn it over to Don to add anything else that you would like to. So in SP3, we introduced Windows Phone 8 management. So you could get it enrolled into the Afaria system. You could set certain configurations. We're pulling inventory data off of the device, etc. In SP4, we introduced the Afaria application portal. So this allows you to have the same capabilities you have in iOS and Android, where you can present applications to your end user to allow them to selectively download whatever apps they would like to do. We've also put in ad hoc messaging so that you can send messages out to these devices from the administrative console. And then if a device is shown up as non-compliant, you can also send messages out to that device and let them know why they're not compliant. Okay, so that's kind of really at a high level. Don, anything you want to add to that area, Windows Phone 8?
No, I think you covered it. There's, to go with the Afaria client app on the administrator is the kind of the ability to create the signed app. It has to be signed, but the ability to create an app that's signed with your enterprise Apple cert so that it will deploy, and it will deploy the enterprise apps that you want to deploy out there. So that's one catch. It's a Microsoft restriction. But yeah, after that, it has the same enterprise and store policies that are pretty similar to the iOS policies.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, so we'll go on to Android. So there's really two big areas on Android. And I'll cover Knox a little bit, more in depth. So it's really the Samsung Knox container, or the big feature set for SP4. But the other one is a comprehensive client-side schedule. So as you know, Android was fairly difficult to get to connect more than once a day. What we've given you now in SP4 is the ability to have a very complex client-side timer and very granularly manageable, so that you can essentially set it up to connect in as often as you want. You can do repeats. You can do all kinds of randomization as far as when, so that all of your devices aren't trying to come in at the same time. It's very, very granular. It's going to help a lot, especially in locales or Google Play isn't necessarily available. And the GCM is not. That's primarily in the China region. So this is going to help so that the client can have a very frequent connection to come in to get policy settings and to report back in and things like that. Okay, so let me go ahead and move on. The Afaria Knox side. So what is Knox? Knox is essentially a container that allows you to have two personas or two different presentations of a UI for what we call the standard user, your personal side, and then, of course, a corporate side. And this corporate container that comes inherent in Samsung Knox-enabled devices only will allow you to, within this container, to put in email clients, browsing, applications, etc. So you've got encryption, you've got full data leak protection. Basically, it just kind of gives you another section on the device that is fully contained and fully secured away from any personal space on the device. And what kind of features do you really have in that Knox area? So I won't go through all of these in depth, but it gives you very comprehensive connection and communication type of security as well as data leak. So you've got things like firewall, of course, VPN. You can have certificates that you would manage and allow to be utilized in that space. There's posture checking on the device so that you know you're not installing any of the secure data onto a device that is not, that has been tampered with. It will protect you from that. You can also sign applications to be utilized, enterprise applications to be utilized within this container. So it kind of gives you a secure way so that if they're not signed by you, they will not run in that container. So it gives you a lot of level protection there. You could build whitelists and blacklists for things and applications running in there. You've got single sign-on. You've got per-app VPN, things like that. And also gives you some other controls as just, general utilization of the container itself. You can do configuration for things that are inside the container. For instance, like the email client in there. On the browser side, you can make some changes there. And then, of course, we're going to collect inventory on that container so you can tell everything that's in there. So essentially, it's an approach to device management, and mobile application management, et cetera, all those things, enterprise mobility management on a device that supports a very solid, very secure type of container. I just wanted to include this side. How do you get set up with a Samsung Knox device? First of all, you need a Knox-enabled device. As far as I know, it's on the Galaxy series right now. You'll need to buy Knox licenses from a Knox reseller. And if you're interested in that, we can try to help you guys work that one out. Once they do that, they'll provide you a license key. And then that license key is something that you're going to enter into the Afaria console, which will then allow you to do the whole Knox process. Be happy to have more in-depth technical conversations if you guys are interested. We also have an expanded version of this slide deck that should be available to you that you can go and it gives you a little bit more detail. Okay, I think that's what I've got on Android. Is there anything that you want to add on that one, Don?
No. I think you got that one.
Okay, very good. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some changes that we've done in access control. So we've made some changes here. So one, of course, I think the biggest change we've made was we used the SAP filter that actually ran in a DMZ on an ISOBox to filter the email in. There's been some challenges with that. We still support it, and we are adding some improvements for that. But what we found is on Exchange 2010 and above, they have native commands that use PowerShell that will allow the Exchange CAS servers to really filter this email on who does and does not actually get the email. This is much like we would manage a Microsoft 365 cloud implementation of email. And so they had the very same commands that we can send directly to the CAS box. So this allows you to basically eliminate a component in the DMZ if you would like, and allows the scalability to kind of happen naturally based on the CAS servers, and let those decide to reject or accept the email based on input from Afaria. So, for instance, if a device is found to be non-compliant, we'll send that message to the CAS server saying, "Do not allow this device to get email," and they'll be blocked until we give it the go ahead signing in. So we found that is a much cleaner solution, and we're continuing to put a lot of effort into that, and I think we'll continue to use that. SAP Filter currently is still being supported in its current fashion in the DMZ, so you should still be able to use that if you want to, and especially on older versions of Exchange.
And so the clarification, Mark, is if you are running a CAS, so the CAS can talk to Exchange 2003, so you can have a mixed environment or, CAS that supports 2013. Apparently it'll support talking to Exchange 2003. This being 2014, I'm not sure how much longer that's relevant for people, but Microsoft does support ways to support the commandlets in a mixed environment than one that may have older versions of Exchange, apparently, because there was definitely a question about that.
All right, very good. Okay, that's good to know. Also, one of the changes we made was around remediation. Earlier in the beginning of the presentation, we talked about document management. As you know, we've got SAP Mobile Documents, which is a document management software solution. We put some integration into Afaria so that you can utilize our compliance and remediation section, so that if a device were determined to be non-compliant for some reason, you could wipe the mobile docs container off the device if you'd like to. A couple other things, we put in a message so that when a device comes back into compliance, you send them a message out to the device, so you're not just letting them know what they did wrong, but you're also letting them know that they're okay again. Okay. So one thing on the NAC support side, Don, this is really your bailiwick. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of talk a little bit about the NAC stuff, and then we'll go on from there.
Right. So this is something that first came out in SP3. It was specific to Cisco Identity Services Engine. It's being expanded, and so now Cisco and Forescout have certified Afaria plugins to do this. And basically what it does is, in a simple case, user walks into the office, you have a corporate Wi-Fi network. The network access box gets the MAC address from 802.11, queries Afaria through our API, the NAC API, to find out, Afaria, is this device enrolled and is it compliant? And Afaria returns, and then NAC determines let it on the network or reject it. If they let it on, the user sees nothing. If it rejects it, it routes them to a redirection page that the customer maintains and can configure to say, hey, this is why you're on this page. You're not registered or you're not compliant. Fix those things and you can try again and come back on. They may even have a link to the self-service portal to click here and go bring it on again. So this is being expanded, and so this used to be just specific to Cisco ICE. It's now generalized to be called NAC, and we're in the process of working with 4 or 5 other vendors in the space to do the exact same thing. So that'll continue to roll out through the NAC space as well as to other application or security gateways that have similar needs, both Wi-Fi and VPN. So that's really the value is around it, and the note here is this used to be just very specific to Cisco ICE. And it caused consternation for other vendors to have to configure a competitor's page. So now it's called network access control. So that's it.
Thank you, Don. Okay, so we also made some changes in the admin console. So a couple things that we did was really around performance. If you had, say, 100,000 devices set up in your devices grid, it could take several, well, let's just say that we clocked it at about 43 seconds to paint, if you had that many in there. We brought that down to 3 seconds. So we made some improvements there so that if you've got a huge number of devices in there, you have much better performance. We also got rid of all the little spinners on there. So whenever you click something, you would see 5 spinners pop up. We consolidated that down to a single spinner. And we also reduced the number of what we call postbacks. So what that really means is that it's not always calling for a repaint on every action. We're reducing that, and we're only doing it when you really need to see that extra information. Another thing we did is expanded role permissions. So we got pretty granular on some of the role permissions. So now you can not only do much more controlled type of access to different functions within the Afaria administrator, you can also just essentially block actions as well as what they can see and do. So down to the policy level and the group level. In other words, I might be able to view groups, but I can't edit them or modify them or add them, right? Or I might be able to do certain things on policies. I might be able to do remote kill on corporate devices, or I might not be able to. So there's quite a few new types of permissions in there that give you a lot of control over your end users. And another important one, especially in multi-tenant systems, there is the ability to restart the server in the admin configuration section. So what you're able to do now is really base that on roles so that you can give administrators some control into the server config, but not in any areas that might affect values outside of tenant, as well as restarting that server. So you don't have a customer, for instance, trying to restart your entire multi-tenanted Afaria system. So we kind of fixed that too. We also changed the map interface. If you're utilizing the activity management where we're collecting that data for their location, we had 2 mapping areas. It was basically in the console and the activity area, and also in the self-service portal where the user could look at the last known location. We've changed that over to NavTech. It really shouldn't matter other than the Microsoft API is no longer working. You'd have to update to SP4 to use that, the new maps. Self-service portal. I think the big thing here really is the fact that if you had to install the self-service portal before, you had to, if you had any changes to that self-service portal, you had to do a reinstall. Well, we've moved all the settings and configurations of the self-service portal into the admin console, so there's no reinstall required. So this kind of gives you a lot more control without having to do a lot more administration around the software itself. And I'm going to go a little fast because I want to leave some time for questions and for our roadmap. Very quickly on the message log side, we got very granular on the logs now, and we tie those to the users that are actually doing the thing. So, for instance, if someone does a remote kill on the device, we're going to tell you that they did it and who did it. So it gives you a lot more for troubleshooting and auditing in that area. And we also improve some of the custom data views as far as the tenanting. There's some areas that still weren't quite all the way multi-tenanted. We covered those in SP4. Package server staging. Essentially what we're doing is this is really reducing database usage. So if I want to deliver an application to a device, let's just say it's 5,000 devices, every device is not having to go to the database to retrieve that application now. We're going to stage that in cache on the package server so that it only comes from the database the first time, and then it gets distributed to the other devices on that request from the cache on the package server. So it's going to really help a lot with the database operation. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into the roadmap. So right now our release schedule looks like we're going to have an SP5 release around the June timeframe. That's what the current projected timeframe is. So there's quite a few features that we want to get into that, and we're going to focus mostly here on the center column. And so some of these are going to be in SP5. Some of these are, officially with SAP rules, this is really around 18 months that we're talking about from now. So I'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more in depth. So as I stated earlier, enrollment is an area that we're really constantly trying to provide improvements and to streamline because we want it to be as easy as possible. So there's a couple things that we're doing in this area. One is around Android. So we want to be able to put as little on the end user as possible when they're trying to enroll. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to put in a seed file, if you're utilizing the self-service portal, down to the device so that when the end user goes to download the Afaria client from Google Play and they run that client, it will consume that seed file so they're not having to go back and forth putting in enrollment codes and things like that. So it's going to really make that self-service portal experience on Android a lot easier for enrollment. Another thing that we're doing is we're adding features around Windows Phone and Windows 8.1. So not only the phone operating system, but also the Windows Pro version of 8.1 as well. That we can have a discovery service so that it will make it much easier to enroll all of the different settings that you got to put in Windows Phone. As we know, it's a little bit difficult because you got to put different things in there. So we're trying to make that easier and streamline with that discovery service. That will be a separate component off of the Afaria service that you can then put into the DMZ. Okay. Another thing on the enrollment side is really going to be around iOS. So one of the features in iOS 7 was the enterprise enrollment program that they're doing. Essentially what that is where they're going to be if you want to buy devices directly from Apple, you can utilize those in such a way that it may be a corporate-owned type of device, and they'll put certain settings on there that allow you to have MDM be an inherent part of the OS, in that it will, on a hard reset, kind of go back to some of the settings. And it puts everything in a supervised mode. It gives you a lot more granular control over a corporate-owned device. And so we're going to be adding that into the next version of Afaria as well. On the certificate side, as you know, right now we just support SCEP. What we're going to be doing now is expanding that so that we can support different user templates, manage more of the life cycle of the certificates, so that you can request a certificate against a CA using a template, which is going to allow you to use identity type search or user-based certificates, get those delivered to the device, to put those certificates on an auto-renew cycle so that renewal will be very easy and programmatic and you won't have to really deal with it, as well as better reporting of those certificates that are delivered to the devices. So that's the phase one of it. We're going to continue to add more to that as time goes on, but that's going to be a pretty big area of functionality that we're going to be filling. Of course, some continuous UI improvements. We want to make sure that we try to streamline things and make things a little bit easier to use, especially in the admin console. So that's kind of an ongoing project that we do. Localization, we're going to be adding a few languages. I'm not sure how interesting that is to everybody, but we're looking to add Romanian, Russian, and Turkish to the client side of things so that you can have better localizations for those particular areas. Application analytics. So this seems like one of the next areas really to go into. The developers want to be able to do certain checks on applications.
how often is it run, what pages are being visited, that kind of information. So we provide that feedback loop today, but we see that as kind of an area that will evolve and that will become a little bit more standardized. And I think as time goes on, we want to provide the type of, the data model that allows you to pull that data into Afaria and then build analytics on top of that. So that's, I think, an area that we're going to be making some progress on as well. On the different things around enterprise integration, we're going to make some cloud advancements. As you know, we're putting a lot of effort into our cloud offering, our SAP Afaria Cloud.com. And so we're, of course, putting a lot of advancements in that area to make it a little bit more conducive to the cloud. So that's just going to be kind of an ongoing effort for us. But we're going to continue to put things into making that more multi-tenanted, to make it the APIs to be expanded in such a way that they can be utilized, in the cloud, and just put a lot of effort into that. So we can get into more details. I think if you guys are really interested in that, we can have a separate call to talk about that stuff. Compliance and remediation. So as you know, you can do that today utilizing the dynamic groups. We're going to expand that, I think, primarily around a compliance engine where you can do a lot of state action pair type of operations. If this is the case, then I want you to do that. So we're going to be putting a lot of effort into that over the next couple of releases. So I would expect to see quite a few changes, even down to the point where, I think long-term, you're looking at more around the risk-based management for these devices, giving you risk ratings and stuff like that. So that's kind of a direction that we're going to be moving down the road very aggressively in the next few releases. And then on the platform side, so really, let me kind of talk a little bit more around some things around SP5 that we're doing. So one is Mac. So you're going to have Mac support for the laptop side of things. So it's managed much like a standard iOS tablet or an iPhone, except some of the payloads are definitely going to be different. There's some common ones. There's some that are actually individual to Mac. You're going to have this within the Afaria console now as a separate client type so that you can utilize MDM on your Mac deployments within your enterprise as well. In that same vein, we're going to be supporting Windows Professional 8.1 going forward. Microsoft is adding quite a few new capabilities in that fashion, so they're trying to converge on the confusing nomenclature of Windows 8.1 because Windows 8.1 is out, but Windows Phone 8.1 is not out yet. We're hoping to hear some stuff around that in April, but we're not sure. We're all kind of guessing as to what's going to be ready when. But they're trying to converge those APIs to be fairly singular so that the platform, no matter what the form factor, is going to be managed somewhat the same. And so what we're doing in SP5 is adding the Windows, and this is the professional version, not the phone, as a new client type within Afaria so that you can manage those with the capabilities that are there. Now, what we're starting with really is around just getting enrolled. There's going to be some configurations that are available, I think, like Wi-Fi and ActiveSync, stuff like that, password control stuff. We're intending to include that, but then we're also investigating and expanding on that API to see what we can add now and into the future. So it's going to be a platform that we are going to support fully under the new management model going forward. Okay, so I've already talked about the Android enrollment improvements. So another area that we're putting some effort into is around the self-service portal. Right now, you can have multiple self-service portals per tenant. One of the things that we're wanting to do here is to have a single instance of self-service portal that can be utilized across multiple tenants within the Afaria system. So to give you that flexibility if you want to tie, say, a self-service portal per tenant or one self-service portal to multiple tenants, that you can use the same authentication model and then basically do your client routing and grouping through the Afaria server, and then just have one web page that essentially everybody can go to, they'll get authenticated into, and then we'll know where to route them to. So that's an area that we're hoping to get into SP5. I think that's a pretty big thing to offer, and I think hopefully be welcomed by a lot of you. On the NAC side, and I think this is about it, and then we can open it up to questions, and we'll give you guys about 10 minutes or so. So we're, of course, adding some performance improvements. We're going to continue to add scalability whenever we see issues there, and to broaden the functionality there on the NAC side. A couple things that we're looking at really are integration into Mocana and F5. And what that really means is Mocana is our application wrapping solution partner. And they're building a mobile access gateway so that you can put that on the end of your network. And the applications that are trying to access your network, if they're wrapped, they'll communicate through that mobile gateway. And that gateway will check back within Afaria to see if we feel that that device is okay. In other words, does that device have Afaria management on it? And if the answer comes back yes, then they'll go ahead and let that application communicate into your back end through the VPN and to the gateway. And if not, then they will not. So it kind of gives you application protection outside of the network. And we're doing the same type of capabilities with the F5 client, so that they'll do a posture check against Afaria as well, so that when things are trying to come into the F5, they'll check with Afaria to see if they should be let through or not. So we see this as a big trend going forward. A lot of people wanting to put access control for mobility and base that on a posture or a state defined within the mobile device management system. So I think this is another area that we're going to be putting a lot of focus in the near future, near and long term, I would say, as well. Okay. Long term, you guys can read the right side, but as you know, with mobility, things are very fluid. But in general, we're always going to be putting work into the end user experience, always trying to streamline the enrollment whenever possible, investigating the different technologies that are circling device management, if you will. And I talked a little bit about risk-based management. You've got different types of application management that are out there. Mobile access gateways are very seen as a very important area of investment as well. So we're going to be putting efforts into a lot of the different areas that kind of circle it to continue to round out the enterprise mobility management solution from SAP. Regular roadmap updates, we should be doing those to kind of keep you guys up to speed. But that's kind of our general direction. So I think at this point, I'll give you guys a few minutes for questions. So can you guys please open this up to the folks on the call to ask questions?
Certainly. To ask a question, please press *1 to ask a question. We will take as many questions as time permits and proceed in the order you signal us. A voice prompt on your phone line will indicate when your line is open to ask a question. Please state your name before posing your question. Once again, press *1 to ask a question. We'll pause for a moment to assemble the queue. Again, as a reminder, please press *1 to ask a question.
Okay.
There are no questions from the telephone audience at this point.
Okay. I did see one that came up from Lewis. He said, are we going to release a specific hotfix or new service pack for iOS 8, for example? So anytime there's new functionality in a platform, it's usually going to take a hotfix from Afaria to support it. Now, we do our best to support backwards compatibility in that the new operating system, our client that's currently available will run on that new operating system. If we find issues, especially when we see the betas, we might have to release a patch, but generally it's been okay. But if you want to have new capabilities that are included in that operating system, it will most undoubtedly require an update from Afaria. We also got one here, any roadmap from Eric on CE support. We plan to support this OS. So right now, CE, we haven't put a lot of changes or effort into the older platforms. Basically, I think the functionality that we have today is what we'll have in the future on the old Windows Mobile side of things. On the Windows Phone side, we're going to be putting a lot of effort into that. Windows Phone Blue will be offering some much more comprehensive capabilities for MDM, probably much in the line of iOS model. We're going to be adding those capabilities to that platform as time goes on. I think that the release is going of Phone Blue, we don't really know what it is, but from what we can ascertain, is going to really kind of be at odds with the SP5. So we see those capabilities probably coming more in the form of our SP6 release, whenever that tends to be, and we'll talk more about that later on as we get closer. But that will be something that we're going to be fully involved in and fully dedicated to supporting long term. We are not dropping the functionality on Windows and CE right now, on Windows Mobile and CE, but you will not get any new features, at least at this point. Plan to deliver hot fixes on automatic updates. That's a good idea. We haven't really given that a lot of discussion. We like to make sure that you want to put the updates in. So I think for now we'll be releasing those as standalone hot fixes that will be at your discretion to install.
Except for the cloud. So obviously in the cloud, those customers don't worry about any of that. So all that's done for them in the cloud.
Very, very good point, Don. So yeah, so the cloud is a separate entity. Those guys are trying to get down to a biweekly cadence on releases. So you should see features come very quickly and automatically in those areas. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. Please don't be shy. Please chime in if you'd like to ask a question.
And as a reminder, please press *1 to ask a question.
Going once? Going twice? All right. Well, I guess we call it then. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. Hopefully this was helpful to you. We'll try to do these periodically to keep you guys up to date. Again, SP5 is currently slated for kind of the end of Q2. It might be a good idea to do one of these again in Q2 timeframe to talk more about what we're looking at in our next releases and maybe give you a little bit more solidity onto exactly what would be in SP5. So we'll try to schedule that with the team and put that up on the board so you guys can participate in that. But thank you all very much, and we will turn this back over to you, Rahul, and thank you again.
Thank you, Mark. On behalf of the SAP KPS team, I would like to thank Mark and Don. We would also like to ask you to provide your feedback using the link displayed in the chat window. This now concludes the presentation. Thank you for your attention. You may disconnect at this time.